Welcome back to the Deep Dives. This is where we take a stack of sources, articles, even your own research, and just pull out the most important insights. We're here to cut through all the noise.
Give you that shortcut.
Exactly. And today we are tackling a topic that, well, it affects almost everyone at some point, but it's still surprisingly something we don't talk about much. Chronic digestive backup and some of the really dramatic claims surrounding the whole idea of accumulated gut waste.
They're definitely dramatic.
So our mission today is pretty laser focused. We've been digging into a set of sources that all point to this really pervasive and frustrating problem.
This feeling a lot of people have.
Right. The daily struggle with constipation, that persistent bloating, and just that awful lingering feeling of, well, of incomplete emptying. For a lot of people, this isn't just a brief thing. It's a chronic discomfort that just drags them down.
It does, and that's really where our analysis of this material has to begin. We have to address the sensational claims they use to really underscore the urgency. These sources, they're not just talking about being irregular for a day or two. They're coming from the natural health space, and they're suggesting that the sheer volume of this accumulated matter can become massive. They propose that the average person struggling with this might be carrying several pounds of uneliminated material.
Several pounds.
And that's just the average. If we look at the outer limits, the estimates that they reference, particularly for a severely backed up colon, the numbers they put out there are, frankly, arresting.
Okay.
The potential for retained hardened waste is estimated to range anywhere from 5 up to 20 pounds of matter just sitting stagnant in your intestines.
Wow. 5 to 20 pounds. Okay, let's just pause on that for a second because that is a truly staggering, almost unbelievable number.
It is.
It just completely changes how most of us think about, mild constipation. If someone is carrying an extra 10 pounds of old material, that moves the problem from a simple inconvenience to a massive systemic load on the body.
Precisely. And it's important to frame this by saying the sources use some pretty charged language to stress the urgency. They do admit that the 20-pound figure is often on the extreme end, from cleansing experts.
Okay.
But they justify the lower, more common 5 to 10-pound range by talking about the sheer volume of the colon itself. And they emphasize that if you postpone elimination by just 3 or 4 days, the body keeps reabsorbing water, and that dramatically increases the mass and the density of what's left behind.
Ah, so it's not just sitting there, it's changing. It's getting harder and heavier.
Exactly. The mass versus the volume.
That distinction is crucial. Okay, let's unpack this. Our objective today is to really dissect the solution that the source material proposes, and we have to treat the problem with the urgency they suggest. So we're going to investigate these 3 incredibly powerful natural ingredients.
Prunes, flax, and raisins.
Right. And we're going to break down the specific, and they say century-old, mechanics behind why they work. What makes this recipe so powerful? And why do these sources claim it's actually better than many standard over-the-counter options?
Right, let's get into it.
So let's start with the groundwork. How severe is this problem, according to our sources? They assert that this isn't just discomfort. They frame it as a profound internal health crisis that impacts everything from your energy to your mental clarity.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time establishing the mechanical reality of it. The mechanism they describe is simple but relentless. When waste sits in the intestines for too long, the body's natural function, which is to conserve water, just kicks into overdrive.
Because the colon's main job is to pull water out.
Exactly. It pulls out
Right.
necessary water and electrolytes. But when transit time slows way down, that process gets prolonged. And the result is the material accumulates and, critically, it becomes desiccated. It hardens. The sources call this impacted or stubborn waste.
And I imagine that just makes everything worse.
Think about the physics of it. Hardened matter is really difficult for the muscles of the colon to grip and push. It reduces the contact with the intestinal wall that you need for smooth peristalsis. So the muscles have to work harder, and a lot of the time they just fail to move it forward.
Which creates a vicious cycle. Stagnation leads to more hardening, which leads to more stagnation.
Precisely. And that's where the sources shift from just describing a physical blockage to describing a a systemic threat. They stress that you could be carrying around pounds of old, hardened fecal matter that should have left your system days or even weeks ago.
And the core danger isn't just the blockage itself.
No, that's what they emphasize. The real danger isn't just the discomfort, it's the consequences of that material staying inside your body for so long. And this leads directly to what they call a systemic poisoning, or
Autointoxication, I've heard that term.
that's the one. And this brings us to that famous or maybe infamous toxin claim. We hear that word all the time in the natural health community. What exactly are the consequences they're detailing?
Yeah, what are these toxins?
So the primary mechanism of harm they describe is the reabsorption of harmful compounds back into the bloodstream. You have to imagine the colon not just as a waste chute, but as a really efficient recovery system.
For water and electrolytes, like you said.
Right. It's designed to pull those things through the semipermeable membrane of the intestinal wall. But if you have this putrescent retained waste sitting against those walls for days on end, the sources claim the body just keeps doing its absorption job.
But it starts absorbing the wrong things.
Exactly. It mistakenly draws in harmful metabolic byproducts and waste compounds that should have been eliminated. And once those are absorbed, they start circulating, overwhelming the liver's detoxification capacity and entering your general circulation.
And that reabsorption process is what they then link to this whole cascade of symptoms that, on the surface, don't immediately make you think constipation.
That's right. The symptoms fall into a couple of categories. First, you have the obvious ones. Chronic bloating, stomach discomfort. That's easy to link to gas and the physical mass of what's in there. But the sources, they focus heavily on the secondary, systemic symptoms. Things like a profound, unexplained low energy throughout the day. A feeling of just being chronically sluggish. And maybe the most cited complaint, brain fog.
Brain fog, that's a big one.
A huge one. The theory they present is that if your bloodstream and your liver are constantly dealing with these circulating byproducts of stagnant digestion, your overall systemic function is compromised, especially the brain.
Because the brain uses so much energy.
It does. They suggest these compounds interfere with neurotransmitter function or maybe increase inflammation, leading to that distinct feeling of mental dullness, difficulty concentrating. You just don't feel sharp.
So you can't really expect to be at your peak mentally if your internal environment is struggling with this high waste load.
That's the argument. And they also get into the aesthetic claim, which, let's be honest, resonates with a lot of people. The stubborn, protruding belly that just won't go away.
Right. We've all heard stories of people who are so rigorous with their diet and exercise, but their midsection just refuses to flatten out.
And the sources link this directly to uneliminated waste. They suggest that no matter how lean you are otherwise, if you're carrying 5, 10, even 15 pounds of backed up material, well, that sheer volume plus the gas buildup creates a persistent, visible distension that no amount of sit-ups is going to fix.
It's the physical, external sign of what's going on inside.
It is. They use some pretty visceral language here, claiming the body is essentially being poisoned by waste that should have been eliminated ages ago. It paints this picture of a body working against itself.
Where the failure of one basic function undermines all your other health efforts.
Exactly. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources frame this not as some localized plumbing issue, but as a crisis of systemic burden. When the digestive system is clogged, they argue, everything in your body suffers.
Nutrient absorption is impaired, hydration is taxed.
Energy metabolism is inefficient, and like we said, cognitive function is stressed.
The urgency, then, is paramount. The claim is that you really can't achieve full health, mental clarity, or even the look you want until you aggressively and completely clear out this internal backlog. It's step one.
That's how they frame it.
Okay, so given the severity of the problem as they lay it out, with these claims of 5 to 20 pounds of accumulation and the systemic burden, the solution they propose has to be equally powerful.
It does, and the sources pivot here to introduce a natural solution, a very specific recipe using 3 incredibly potent natural ingredients.
And they make a point of saying these have been used for centuries, right?
They do. They lay this foundation of credibility by emphasizing the historical context. This isn't some newfangled lab creation. These are components, prunes, flax, and raisins that have been relied on for centuries in different cultures for these exact problems.
Which suggests a long traditional efficacy, long before modern pharmaceuticals.
Right. The focus is on harnessing concentrated natural compounds that are effective and also widely available. And they're careful to explain that the remedy's power isn't just in, eating more fiber here and there.
It's about the combination.
It's about the specific synergy created when these three particular components are combined in very precise ratios.
Synergy is the key word here.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the problem being multifaceted. You've got hardened mass, poor motility, lack of lubrication. A single ingredient might only address one of those things.
Exactly. So the solution they propose is designed to work on multiple fronts at the same time. It covers all the bases you need to clear that deep, hardened backlog. We're talking about compounds that introduce massive osmotic pressure to rehydrate the waste,
Okay.
others that provide physical lubrication to reduce friction, and then finally, compounds that ensure powerful muscular stimulation to actually move the material out. It's a comprehensive, layered attack on stagnation.
So we are definitely not just talking about adding a handful of these to your breakfast cereal. This is a concentrated, almost therapeutic blast.
It is, and the preparation method, which I know we'll get into, is designed to maximize the immediate bioavailability of these substances, so that when the mixture hits your digestive tract, the components are already activated and ready to start the cleaning process.
And that's why they're so insistent that you follow the recipe exactly.
Absolutely. If you leave out even one component, you lose that essential synergistic action. The flax can't lubricate if the prunes aren't pulling in enough water to hydrate it. The prunes can't push the waste out if the flax hasn't provided the bulk to grip onto.
It's the combination that unlocks the potential to deal with that stubborn accumulation we talked about in part 1.
Oh.
Okay, this is where the conversation gets really technical and, frankly, fascinating. Let's get into the mechanism.
Let's do it.
All right, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's break down the mechanics, starting with the first and probably most famous component in digestive health, dried prunes. The sources literally call them nature's most powerful laxative.
It's a bold claim.
It's a very bold claim, especially when you pit it against modern pharmaceutical options. So what makes prunes such a digestive powerhouse?
Well, it boils down to a perfect trifecta of functional components, all working at the same time. The most immediate and potent one is the high concentration of a sugar alcohol called sorbitol.
Sorbitol.
And what's crucial to understand about sorbitol is how poorly it's absorbed. Unlike glucose or fructose, which your small intestine breaks down for energy, sorbitol just passes right through. Because of that, it stays highly concentrated in your GI tract until it reaches the large intestine.
And that's where the powerful osmotic effect comes in, correct? If I remember my high school chemistry, osmosis is all about balancing concentrations.
That's exactly right. Because the sorbitol concentration is so high inside your intestines, it acts like a magnet for water. Water naturally moves across the intestinal wall to try and equalize that concentration. So sorbitol is actively pulling water into your intestines from your surrounding tissues.
So it's basically hijacking the body's water regulation system to rehydrate that hard, dried-out matter. It's a natural, controlled flood to combat dehydration in the colon.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this influx of water has two immediate essential effects. First, it massively increases the liquid content of the stool. And second, it actively softens that hard, impacted matter, making it pliable and much, much easier to pass.
So it's a totally different approach than just a bulk-forming agent. This is active rehydration.
It is. But prunes don't stop there. They lead with that aggressive rehydration, but they also bring the necessary volume. That's the second component.
The fiber.
Precisely. They have a significant amount of fiber content. The sources note it's well over 6 grams per cup, and it's a mix of both soluble and insoluble types. This provides the bulk that's essential for triggering the mechanical reflex of the colon.
Okay, so we have rehydration and we have bulk. What's the third part of the trifecta?
The third part provides the motor function, phenolic acids. These are compounds like chlorogenic acids, And their job has nothing to do with lubrication or hydration. It's about raw muscular action.
So they're stimulants.
Purely stimulatory. These phenolic acids actually stimulate the muscles in the intestines, the ones responsible for that wave-like motion called peristalsis, to contract more forcefully and more efficiently. They push the contents through the colon.
Wow. So it really is a full spectrum approach. You've
Mhm.
got the sorbitol softening everything up, the fiber adding the bulk, and then the phenolic acids acting like an internal engine, just kicking everything into gear.
And that combination is why the sources rate prunes so highly. It's why they stand by that claim that medical studies have shown prunes to be more effective than many over-the-counter laxatives.
Because those often rely on just one mechanism, right?
Right.
Like only bulk or only stimulation.
Exactly. Prunes provide the osmotic push, the physical bulk, and the muscular stimulation all in one package.
That really reinforces the idea that this isn't just some old wives' tale. There's a multi-layered scientific mechanism at work here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move to the second ingredient, which the sources call absolutely crucial: flaxseed. We've established how prunes initiate the flush and soften the material, but that hard stuff still needs a clear, friction-free path out. Flax works in a completely different way, doesn't it?
It does, and this is where that synergy becomes so obvious and so necessary. If prunes are the softening and contracting agent, flaxseed is the lubrication and structural agent.
Okay.
Its unique mechanism gets activated the moment it meets water, especially the warm water that the recipe calls for. It forms this thick, gelatinous substance called mucilage.
Mucilage.
It's a complex carbohydrate that, when it gets hydrated, expands dramatically and develops this slimy, viscous, almost slippery texture. When you understand that concept, it makes perfect sense why grandmothers have been giving us flaxseed tea for generations.
They were providing an internal slip and slide.
That's a great way to put it. They intuitively knew that.
So what are the specific roles this mucilage plays, especially when you're dealing with hardened waste?
The source material points to two vital roles. First, and critically, it coats the intestinal walls. This coating acts like a natural lubricant, and that drastically reduces friction.
And friction is the enemy here.
Absolutely. You're trying to pass dry, hardened waste. The goal is to help that accumulated matter slide through smoothly. It makes the whole passage less strenuous and potentially a lot less painful.
And the second role?
The second role is its contribution to the overall fiber package. Mucilage is essentially pure soluble fiber, and flaxseed is known for having an incredible balance of both fiber types. The soluble fiber absorbs all that water that the prunes and raisins are pulling in, and it becomes that soft, pliable gel.
Adding to the overall volume and softness.
Right. And then you have the insoluble fiber component of flax that's equally crucial.
How does that work?
The insoluble fiber doesn't dissolve. It retains its structure, and it provides this necessary abrasive bulk. This bulk physically pushes against the intestinal walls, and that's what triggers the stretch receptors that initiate the reflex for a powerful bowel movement.
So it's like a stiff brush sweeping things along.
It's a perfect combination. The soluble fiber softens and lubricates, while the insoluble fiber provides the structure and bulk for clearance.
So flax is providing the slick pathway while also adding the structural material needed for a complete cleanout. It's lubricating and bulking at the same time. Okay, that leaves us with the third ingredient: raisins.
Right.
I have to admit, when I first saw raisins on the list, my first thought was what the sources predicted. That this was just for sweetness, to make it taste better.
To mask the earthy flax flavor.
Exactly. But the sources stress that raisins have their own unique functional importance here.
They do. And raisins contribute two specific mechanisms that just stack on top of the effects of the prunes and flax. They make sure the action is potent and sustained. The first contribution is tartaric acid.
Tartaric acid.
It's an organic acid found in high concentrations in grapes and raisins. And this acid works synergistically with that huge fiber load to significantly speed up the transit time of waste through the colon.
So it's an accelerator.
It is. Acids like this can affect the pH balance and motility signals in the gut. encouraging the muscles to maintain that forward propulsion. And this is crucial because you don't want all that softened, lubricated material to just sit there. You want it out. Raisins make sure the process accelerates.
They ensure the system finishes the job. And what's the second role they play?
The second role comes from their high concentration of natural sugars. While the prunes are offering that aggressive osmotic effect from the unabsorbed sorbitol, raisins provide an additional mild osmotic effect.
So they're also pulling water in.
They're pulling even more water into the intestines. And this supplementary hydration is important for two reasons. One, it ensures that the mucilage from the flax is fully hydrated and doing its job. And two, clearing out several pounds of old, hardened waste that requires a massive, sustained delivery of water right at the site of impact. Raisins make sure the environment stays watery and soft enough to get the job done.
So what we have here is truly a system. It's not just a random mix of fruits.
Not at all.
Prunes bring the initial shock and hydration with sorbitol and the muscle contraction with phenolic acids. Flax provides the structural bulk and the lubricant with mucilage. And raisins provide the acceleration with tartaric acid and extra hydration with their natural sugars.
It's a highly deliberate formula. It's designed to address that specific problem of chronic, hardened accumulation. And that synergy is key to why the sources claim this can clear out that deep-seated backlog that might be contributing to all those chronic symptoms we talked about earlier.
From low energy to the stubborn belly.
The goal is total systemic clearance.
All right, so the power lies in the synergy and the concentration. This is not a vague suggestion to just eat more fiber. It's a blueprint for an intensive therapeutic dose. So we need to shift now to the practical side of this, the exact quantities required for this remedy.
Precision is absolutely crucial here. The whole thing works because you're hitting a necessary threshold of fiber, sorbitol, mucilage, all those active compounds. The sources are crystal clear on the measurements.
Okay, what are they?
Here are the specific components for a single serving. First, 15 dried prunes.
15. That's a very specific number.
It is. It's to ensure you get that high sorbitol and phenolic acid threshold for the osmotic action and the muscle stimulation. Second, 2 full tablespoons of seedless raisins.
Again, very precise.
That provides the exact dose of tartaric acid and the supplementary sugars to keep transit time rapid and hydration sustained. Third, 1 full tablespoon of flaxseed.
Okay.
That's the amount needed to create that heavy dose of lubricating mucilage when it's fully hydrated. And finally, 200 milliliters of warm water.
And the volume of water is intentionally limited, it sounds like.
It is, to concentrate the effect. But the temperature is critical.
The preparation method is equally important. They say you put all 4 components into a high-powered blender and process on high until it's a smooth, thick mixture.
Right. And the point of the high-speed blending is to mechanically break everything down, expose that internal mucilage in the flax, and ensure the maximum release of all the active compounds before you even drink it.
They compare the consistency to a smoothie, but a much thicker one.
Much thicker because of the heavy fiber and the mucilage activating immediately. It reflects the density of what's in there, and you should drink it right after blending before it completely sets.
And there's a really critical instruction about taste. They say do not add any sugar or artificial sweeteners.
Emphatically. The prunes and raisins provide enough natural sweetness. Adding extra sugar could interfere with the osmotic balance or just dilute the whole thing. The mixture is meant to taste potent. It reflects its purpose.
Okay, now let's talk about the consumption instructions, because this is where the urgency and immediate action really come in. The delivery is just as critical as the ingredients.
Absolutely. The sources are very specific about 2 things here. First, the role of warm water. They state that warm water activates the ingredients immediately.
How does it do that?
It accelerates the hydration process for the flaxseed mucilage, and it speeds up the solubility and release of the sorbitol and tartaric acids. It just prepares the whole mix for an immediate impact once it hits your stomach.
And the second instruction is maybe the most important.
It is. You must drink the entire mixture in one concentrated dose. This is not something to be sipped or savored over an hour.
They specifically say not to drink it slowly through the day.
A strict prohibition. The body needs that sudden, high concentrated dose of everything all at once to overwhelm the resistance of that hardened waste and trigger the powerful cleansing effect.
Just to underscore the sheer potency here, if you add up those ingredients in those quantities, this single dose delivers over 20 grams of fiber.
Over 20 grams.
That's more than 2/3 of the recommended daily intake for many adults, all in one shot.
I mean, think about the physiological shock of that. That massive fiber intake, plus the laxative compounds in the liquid, it all works to overwhelm the inertia of the waste. It's an internal flushing system.
It's designed to hydrate from the inside out, lubricate the path, and stimulate the muscles to push it all out at once.
Right. It's specifically designed to bypass the slow, gradual effects you get from just adding a bit more fiber to your diet here and there.
It's designed to force the issue.
Yeah.
Which makes sense if you believe the source's claims about how dense and old that retained waste is.
It does.
So when someone follows this exact blueprint, the concentrated dose, the 20+ grams of fiber, the sorbitol, the mucilage, what do they need to know about the results? What's the timeline? This sounds like a pretty dynamic experience.
It absolutely is, and you need to be prepared for it. The sources provide a very clear and pretty rapid elimination window. They state that the ingredients start working immediately, and that within 2 to 6 hours, the body will begin the elimination process.
2 to 6 hours. That's fast.
It is. It's a direct result of that concentrated dose and the activation from the warm water and blending. And listeners should be prepared for the nature of what comes next.
This isn't just a single event.
No, the expected result is not a gentle single movement. They report that most people will experience multiple bowel movements over a span of several hours. And crucially, the sources stress that this is completely normal and exactly what should happen.
Because the goal is a deep cleansing.
Exactly. You're trying to clear out that multi-pound backlog. That requires significant activity and volume over a short period. The body is effectively ejecting material that's built up over days or weeks, so the frequency and volume reflect that.
That's a key point, normalizing that experience. Otherwise, someone might think they've overdone it. The goal is volume clearance, not just regular maintenance. The sources really stand behind this, saying it's real and has been proven effective by thousands.
They do. Their confidence comes from the observable, immediate effect of the synergy. However, with any powerful ameni, even one from Whole Foods, we have to talk about the critical caveats.
The safety warnings.
Right. And what the sources themselves say about when to seek medical help.
So what does this all mean? When should someone realize that this powerful natural remedy isn't enough and they need to see a professional? How do you balance this kind of aggressive, self-administered cleanse with responsible health monitoring?
This is maybe the most crucial piece of advice, and the sources are very firm here. They state explicitly that if, after trying this recipe, you still don't get relief after a day or two, you must consult a doctor.
So if it doesn't work, that's a red flag.
A big one. This recipe is positioned as highly effective for most cases of stubborn constipation and occasional backup. If it fails, the material strongly suggests there's a deeper mechanical or systemic issue that's resistant to even this concentrated approach.
And the reason for that consultation is critical.
It is. Chronic, treatment-resistant constipation can be a sign of underlying health issues. It could be anything from medication side effects to structural problems in the colon, or even conditions like severe IBD, things that require a professional medical diagnosis.
So the remedy is a tool, not a cure-all.
Exactly. It's positioned as a powerful treatment for occasional backup or stubborn constipation, but never a replacement for a serious medical evaluation. It's an intensive, one-time cleanse, not a substitute for managing a chronic condition under a doctor's care.
That context is vital. It's powerful for functional issues, but it's not a diagnostic tool for organic disease.
You've got it.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into natural gut cleansing. We've covered a lot, from that dramatic 5 to 20 pound claim of retained waste and the theory of systemic toxicity, all the way to the meticulous blueprint for this prune, flax, and raisin remedy.
It's quite a journey.
It is. And the key takeaways really center on that powerful layered synergy we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
We learned that prunes deploy the high density of sorbitol for that massive osmotic hydration, plus the stimulating phenolic acids to drive motility.
Then you have flaxseed introducing the lubricating mucilage and that essential abrasive bulk.
And finally, raisins contributing tartaric acid for acceleration and supplementary hydration to keep the whole process flowing. It's this specific combination delivered in a single high-concentration dose that the sources claim can achieve a truly deep internal clearance.
And that leads us to a final, I think, provocative thought for you to consider based directly on the material we just analyzed.
Right.
The source material claims, with a lot of emphasis, that this natural fiber-rich formula harnessing the power of these 3 centuries-old ingredients is often more effective than many common over-the-counter pharmaceutical options. So what does that imply about our historical reliance on whole, minimally processed, fiber-dense foods versus the typical, modern, highly refined diet when it comes to just maintaining basic, efficient digestive health?
Think back to that number we mentioned.
Over 20 grams of fiber in one sitting.
Exactly. If that level of concentrated input, the equivalent of an entire day's recommended fiber, is required for a single intensive cleansing event, what does that suggest about the chronic daily deficits in the regular diet of the average person?
That's a powerful question.
It raises a profound question. How much harder are we making our digestive systems work every single day, and how much accumulation is happening over time simply because our daily food choices fail to hit that critical mass of fiber, sorbitol, and mucilage needed for efficient, complete elimination?
It really encourages you to scrutinize the quantity and quality of fiber in your regular diet, especially in light of the explosive efficacy claimed by this concentrated remedy.
It does. A compelling question indeed. That's a great thought to mull over as you reconsider your next grocery run. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We hope this has given you the knowledge to look at those 3 simple ingredients, prunes, flax, and raisins, in a completely new and extremely powerful light.